Even though I didn't speak the language, some of the deepest connections I experienced happened anyway. I think back to over 30 years ago, well, I say almost 30 years ago, when I was a Peace Corps volunteer in East Africa where Swahili is predominantly spoken, and I lived with a host family at the time. And I didn't speak the language. I didn't speak Swahili. And at the time, there was an energy sharing plan and protocol in place where the electricity would be shut off every night. And it was shut off between the hours of, I believe it was 5 p.m. and 3 a.m. And so you really had to plan your activities around that time because you knew you would not have electricity for those hours. And so what happened at the time, and I was in Arusha, Tanzania, is that the families would try to get some of the cooking done that required electricity, but for the most part, everybody was also prepared with charcoal and other ways of getting food cooked, getting water heated. And then they would wake up in the middle of the night, or I should say the early morning, in order to do the ironing. Because although there is a system for using coal in an iron, it was just not as convenient as an electric iron. And so what happened is because in the evenings after dinner, there wasn't any other forms of entertainment, they just would have the kerosene lamp on. And honestly, as the American, as the foreigner in that neighborhood, I became the entertainment. So the house would be filled with people. I had no idea who they were. A lot of them were just children from the neighborhood who just came, and they would just squeeze into the living room and they would just stare at me. And if you know anything about New Yorkers, we do not appreciate being stared at. It's just not part of the accepted culture. A lot of the etiquette in New York City is very specific to New York City because we don't have a lot of personal space in New York. We have to share space. And so we've come up with our own etiquette in terms of how we can give each other as much privacy as possible. Hi, my name is Kalima Fergus Ayele. I'm an international school leader and CEO and founder of Round Trip Ticket Home. At Round Trip Ticket Home, we support schools and school leadership teams with using design thinking tools in order to build cultures of connection and belonging. And I'm talking in these episodes about the experiences I've had when I bought a round the world trip ticket and was able to travel from my home in New York and visit Spain, India, Vietnam, Singapore, and Japan during a sabbatical year. And I would have to say that travel has been a part of my journey over most of my life. I've been to over 50 countries, and at this point I've lived in 5 different countries, and soon to be 6 because I'm getting ready for a move to North Africa in the upcoming months. And so when I think about the experiences I've had, I know that they have really impacted the way that I show up as a leader. And one of those experiences is really being able to connect with people without the use of language. And I find it surprising honestly, how easy it is to connect with people just through humor and through having some humility and maybe feeling a little bit silly as you try to figure out how to greet people and say hello and say thank you and simple phrases, but it's an important way of showing that you really do care and you want to connect. And so I'm talking a little bit about an early experience that I had of living in a community and culture that's very different, and that I did not speak the language, and where I was really just an interesting person to look at. They had never seen anyone or experienced being around someone like me. And so they would gather around in my host family's home. And like I said, I was new, so I honestly didn't know at that stage who was part of the family and who wasn't, who was related to who. And so I just sat in the living room and had all of these folks staring at me. And I remember finally one night, because we're all sitting around a kerosene lamp, so just picture you now have the shadows on the walls, and I just started making shadow puppets with my hands. I started shaping my hands as a little fox and then making a little barking noise, and everyone just started laughing. And I realized in that moment how important and how amazing it is that we can connect with people even when we don't have a shared language. There's a way that we can show up, be it with a smile or just with a way that we can be welcoming and show that we're open to a connection. Now, fast forwarding 30 years, my round the world trip was vastly different. Now you have Google Translate. I could speak into the phone and the phone would translate it to the person that I'm talking to. And I was just blown away by how much easier it is to connect with someone on the other side of the world at this moment in time. There's almost no excuse. I mean, I can imagine before these technologies how challenging and frustrating it is to try to figure out, especially with, I'm using Japan as an example, the level of sophistication of the transportation system and how we were trying to figure out how we were going to take the bullet train and what we were going to do with our luggage. We had some real questions, and the fact that we were just able to use this app to have a whole conversation, and the same thing happened even casually. We had gone to a museum. In fact, Van Gogh's Sunflowers is on display at this museum in Tokyo. And after sitting in the museum cafe, there was an older Japanese couple, and he just wanted to engage. He wanted to talk about politics. He wanted to talk about my life and what I was doing in Japan and what I thought about the country. And we could just use this tool. And so I'm so grateful for the technology that we have in these moments, because it really does make the world so much smaller. So I'm curious to know, how has your experience been with connecting with someone who doesn't speak the language? And what do you do in those moments where you just want to make a connection? It doesn't have to be something so deep and meaningful, but just in that moment of brief interaction where you don't have a shared language, but you still feel a sense of connection. Please write comments below. Yeah, like and share and subscribe. I would love to keep the conversation going. See you soon. Bye for now.